Welcome back to this week's episode of Modern Tech and Transformation. I am Carla Hartman. I'm here with Michael Brown. And if you have not tuned into our videocast podcast before, we discuss how AI, cloud, and digital transformation can play a role in your business and just the latest trends in AI and technology overall. This week, we are going to be focusing on cloud's role in AI adoption. Coming off the end of the year in 2023, there were several cloud conferences. So to start that off, Michael, tell us what you think of cloud's role in AI adoption.
Yeah, so I got to attend Amazon's conference and reInvent there at the end of November, and the week right after that, I got to spend some time at the Dev Intersection Microsoft Azure AI conference. I don't know. I was just really kind of blown away with, when we talk about the generative AI models, when we talk about just machine learning and data analytics, I think it's really cloud that's enabling it, right? Mm-hmm. It's causing it to happen. In one of our previous conversations, we talked about the expense of building and training these generative AI models, from the beginning. And we saw this year Amazon, kind of bring out their own in Titan. We saw Amazon, bring out Amazon Q, which is their kind of co-pilot, business assistant, generative AI model platform. We saw Microsoft Copilot, is going to be generally released, here come January for customers, and it's just we're seeing a lot of compression of the ability to start using these with our own private data, right? We've talked for years about the ability to, hey, could we put AI on our own documentation, on our own databases, on our own financial documents? Now we're really actually getting to the point to where we can do this, right? And it's not some sort of esoteric science experiment. It's something that's, okay, here's the steps to do it. Here's how we make it happen. And, it's really just a compression of the time frame and the expense to be able to get that done. So I think in general, to answer your question, cloud enables it, and cloud is a force multiplier to be able to make your own private information actionable.
Yeah, Gartner's one of my favorite market research firms. I will read anything I can get my hands on by them, and they were saying that cloud's going to continue to increase. Like the compound annual revenue growth is going to continue because to support the data needed for some of these AI models and implementing AI in businesses, it almost doesn't make sense to do on-prem or with hardware or data centers. So the cloud's really going to enable that, and cloud's going to continue to grow. I saw a lot of really cool stuff with AI at Google Cloud Conference. I know we're going to talk about this in a later episode about all the LLMs, but Gemini is multimodal. It's going to be interesting to see.
Go watch the videos on the Gemini Ultra model. It is, it's. I think we're really kind of getting into this. I don't want to call it it's not like a Cold War, but the different companies that are investing heavily in the large language model platforms, that are generating these massive language models, I think they're just going to keep going back and forth, right? Mm-hmm. One-upping each other. Because OpenAI with GPT-4, that was impressive, right? Now we're seeing, DALL-E and a lot of other capabilities come into GPT-4. And then, Amazon came out with Titan. Titan's a little bit different of an approach, right? It's a much smaller model, but Amazon iterates quickly, right? They iterate really, really fast, and they came out with different versions, right? So there's a text version, there's a generative, graphical version. So they have multimodal, but it's across different versions of the model. And then, not to be outdone, Google came out with, Gemini Pro and Ultra, and it's just really impressive. It's both scary and impressive and exciting all at the same time.
So adding on to some of the Gartner research, you mentioned that at the cloud conferences, we're now seeing, hey, you can actually start doing this in business. but a lot of business spend from CIOs, C-level, has been reserved for AI projects for 2025. So what do you think that means for 2024?
I think that there's a couple of things, that's kind of rolling around in my thinking. I think one, starting the budget, if you're budgeting for 24, starting midway through 23, there was still a lot of difficulty to understand how AI, what are the real business use cases of AI? How do you drive that through a budgeting model, right? To be able to back it, other than just it's a great buzzword. So when you're starting to put, unless you've got a really great use case that you can define and push through a budget cycle and get money, it really comes down to experimentation. So if there's budgets, people are thinking about it. It's like they know they have to do it. We're in the hype cycle, right? Where does Gartner say we are in the hype cycle of this?
I think we're still at that climax peak.
Yeah.
We're still at that.
Still growing.
Yeah, we're not declining yet.
Yeah, the trough of disillusionment, or yeah, but we're not there yet. Like it's just getting more exciting. But I think 2024 is going to be the year of experimenting. They're going to, if you're not doing it today, if you go look at, Amazon's Bedrock, you go look at, Copilot for Microsoft, and being able to build private Copilot models inside of, the Microsoft 365 platform, it really gives you the ability to take your own private data and build the vector models of your own data and run it through these large language models. So you can start asking ChatGPT or OpenAI models in Azure about your own data. And then Amazon has a lot of models that you can choose from. They've got different partnerships, but it's the same thing. I'm going to take my data, my financial spreadsheets, my quotes, my work instruction PDFs, my documentation, my customer information, and I can securely, privately put it into a large language model and ask questions about it and truly answer questions about my business with my employees and my customers. And then something that we got to do some technical demos at the Azure AI conference, and really talking about grounding the models. If you can build these models, build quick applications, and make these models just answer simple FAQ documents, and you can ground them in that FAQ document so that it's only going to answer about that document. It's not going to talk about Shakespeare, or it's not going to talk about a lot of different topics. You can really just ground it into the topic that you want, so that you can have that experience for the customer. It helps with cost, it helps with performance, it helps with a lot of different things. So this is the first year. I, as a technologist, as we've been going, I guess ChatGPT came out November last year.
2022?
Yeah, so it was November last year. So 2022 to November this year was a year. So I've really been looking into it, and it was, when you start looking technically about, how do you actually do this? There was, you start getting into, different development work, development kits and vector databases, and it was, it was kind of confusing, right? It was a heavy lift just to be able to go, let's go do this. And I think now that the service providers and the cloud platforms, they're really making the tool sets available so that it's lowered the barrier of entry.
So I'm very familiar with, as a marketer, right, using Claude for some things, the Anthropic tool set, Bard, ChatGPT, very familiar with the creation, and even with the text to image. I have not dabbled in the code part. And I know that as someone that doesn't write code, I know that's part of it. What would you say to someone that's like, this interests me, but there's also fear of the unknown? Where would someone like me start to use this Gen AI in the code part?
You can, it's where I started. I'll tell you where I started with it. I'm not a developer by any means, by trade. I end up writing a lot of scripts and a lot of code in my work, but I've never been paid as that's my job. It's just something that I had to do for my job. you can take a piece of code and drop it into your language model of choice and go, explain this code to me. You can say, almost like a Reddit, like explain like I'm 5, or explain to me as a beginner, what is this code snippet doing? And it'll just walk through and tell you what each line of code is doing, what each function does. And that's really where some of the software companies got in trouble in 2023. Mm-hmm. Their developers were putting their proprietary code into into ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT, when you use that public model, when you've done the click through, they're going to take any data you give it and use that for training in the future. And some of the security teams from these cloud providers found out that their code was coming back in other people's responses, because the developers were taking large sums of code, dropping it in there, says, hey, I want to do this to it. And it would rewrite the code for the functionality that they were looking for, or simplify it, or make it better, or add a piece of capability that they were looking for. It was a force multiplier for them. But they had to block it because it was putting proprietary information.
And the governance came after these were released to the public for free. Yep. So most of these aren't even paid, right? You can find the free versions. So I don't think enterprises and organizations were even ready to have those conversations unless they were a high-tech organization. So interesting, scary, and I think until we get more governance around it, which it's starting to come, we're going to see issues like that continue to happen, but less and less.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really what I was saying at the conferences this year. Is this is how you do it privately, right? Mm-hmm. When I'm not going to be sharing this data. Not only am I not going to be sharing this data publicly, like that's level one, but I only want to share data in the context of which it matters, right? I want accounting to be able to ask financial questions. I want sales to be able to ask sales and projection questions. Mm-hmm. I want my customers to be able to ask product questions. So in being able to set up those models and create that grounding and create those guardrails around your data, so that you still have the same security profiles that you do when you're logging in and you're going through your file system, or you're logging in and you're going to your database. You want your large language models to be able to live up to those exact same security expectations. And that's really where the cloud providers are focusing to make sure that people understand their data is secure, that they're not going to be using customer private data to train their models. The models are trained on general data, and you have, full life cycle security rules and guardrails around those models to be able to build confidence.
So I want to backtrack a little bit. We said this will be the year, so we'll have our governance in place, right? We'll be able to do it privately. So this is going to be the year of experimentation.
I think so.
So people are ideating. As we wrap up this session, let's talk through some cool use cases we've been hearing, or that we hear some ideation on. I'll let you go first.
So, I mean, there's just so many use cases that we think would be really cool, but just work instruction for your employees. Think about onboarding a new employee, and as a solution architect, what are my primary roles, right? You can start asking questions and having your onboarding documentation, your training videos and your training documents, all of the closed caption information for the video. All of that information is now available to be able to ask questions about the role. Who do I report to? Where do I go to find out about vacation? All those things that's normally you have to go through this learning process to understand where the websites are. How do I log into here? How do I log into there? It lowers the barrier of entry to be able to get access to that information, and you can do it with natural language. So it'll help people, number one, onboard into a company, understand the culture faster, and then number two, if you're a developer or if you're a technical resource, just being able to ask questions about the product that you're supporting, right? Be able to move faster. So if you're learning or you're asking questions, or your job is to be able to overcome a learning curve faster, I think large language models are going to be just fabulous for that. And now we can actually take private data, PDFs, instructions, databases, spreadsheets, and actually encode those and make the large language models be able to use them.
That's very exciting. And
Yeah.
then once we get into more of the multimodal, which OpenAI has and Gemini Ultra has, I think the use cases are just going to be endless. Any type of in-person technician, field operations, I know that's
Yeah.
something that's near and dear to us at RTS. How do we optimize that? How do they spend less time? How do they get trained easier?
Yeah.
How can we send a rookie out and how will they be more accurate? So not just the creativity that comes with creating a poem,
Right.
or something in these LLMs, but also the accuracy
Yeah.
that's going to come with it. So that's exciting. As we wrap up, any other cool Gen AI things that you've seen lately?
So it's one I showed you earlier. There's
Yeah.
there's one called Suno AI, SUNO.ai. You give it a prompt, you tell it what kind of music you want, it will write the lyrics and create the song and create the music and then sing it to you within just a couple of seconds. It's pretty crazy.
Do you have an example?
Yeah, I do. So I was looking at, so I have a project that my team's working on. We're migrating some servers to Azure. And so when I discovered this, I was actually on a phone call and I told it to write a rap song like Eminem about moving servers to Azure. And it just did a little work and then it said, so you probably couldn't hear the lyrics to it, but it wrote lyrics, it wrote a bridge, it wrote a chorus, and the cadence, right? It found the cadence like Eminem, and so and you could just sit there and work on it. It's free. You get 150 credits to actually go through and work on it. So the ability to create content and the ability to be a force multiplier. If you're not experimenting personally yourself with these tools in your own job, I don't care if you're a lawyer, I don't care if you're a doctor, an IT person, marketing, you need to start experimenting with it. Just log in and play with it. And try to understand where it can come from, because you're not going to have context until you actually start putting your hands on it. I learned something new that this technology can do almost daily. It helps me to understand my job. It helps me to serve my customers better, more effectively. And I think what we're going to see is, as the technology gets broader and bigger and more accurate and faster, that there's going to be a group of people that use this technology and a group of people that is maybe scared to use it. And you're going to see the work output change because of it.
So I used a lot in marketing for content creation. I don't need a subject matter expert. I don't need to take someone's time. I can get a good outline. I can tweak it. I know enough about tech to be dangerous, right? And then I can use our subject matter experts, but as we build internal repositories, that's even going to take away the time I need to take. So as you're reducing the time that it takes to create by 15-minute, 30-minute, even up to hours increments, that's a game changer. And then I don't know if I want to admit this, but I was an early adopter of the AI portrait generators. And at first, I wasn't very impressed. I wouldn't put anything it generated out to the public. But about a month ago, I did it again. And if you want to see an AI-generated image, if you go to my LinkedIn, I am Carla Hartman, Vice President at Resolve Tech Solutions. That's AI-generated. It's a great photo. It's better than I probably would have taken, so
really cool.
I'm going to own it. But it's come a long way. Like the eyes, the teeth, everything is more spot on, and they make you look flawless. But you also get some back that are pretty humorous, and I think that's part of the fun. But that's all we have for this episode. Tune in next time, and we're going to dive deeper into the large language models.